Hi, everyone. Welcome to my session on speech training about the ESA, the Early Echoic Skills Assessment. This is a test that I wrote some years ago as the echoic portion to go into the VB map that was authored by Mark Sundberg. And he was kind enough to ask me to contribute the echoic part of this verbal operant in assessing verbal skills. So since that time, a lot of questions have come up, and uh, people have emailed me, and we've done a survey to get some feedback so that we know what's clear, what's not clear. And so thus this talk to give some more information to people, primarily to behavior analysts, parents, teachers, people that don't have a background in speech pathology and speech and language training per se, and particularly with respect to speech production. So there will be a section in here on speech production as well. And hopefully this will kind of put everything in a usable package for you, an understandable framework to help you as you plan your programs to work on verbal behavior training with your students and your children, any learner of any age. So I've titled this When and How to Use the Early Echoic Skills Assessment. And because of my interest in training, obviously, I've tried to embed some tips here and there about what you can do for treatment. And again, the input from a speech pathologist is, I think, invaluable when you're looking for information on what are appropriate targets, and their background in speech production really should be sought, and collaboration is pretty much the name of the game. So let's get right into it. So the ESA is part of the VB map, as I mentioned, authored by Mark Sundberg. The VB map has 5 different parts to it. There are 3 assessments: the milestones, where 170 language and learning skills are evaluated, the barriers assessment, the transition assessment, and then the VB map system also has a task analysis and placement and IEP goals. It takes a look at 3 developmental levels, level 1, 2, and 3, that encompasses skills from 0 to 48 months. And the ESA evaluation is really only involved in level 1 and level 2, because at about 30 months of age, the echoic repertoire is already in full force with most learners. And so there is no part or level 3 for the ESA assessment. So the purpose is to evaluate someone's ability to repeat a speech model. There are 5 different groups. One takes a look at simple syllables and reduplicated syllables. Group 2 looks at 2-syllable combinations. Group 3, 3-syllable combinations. And then groups 4 and 5 take a look at prosody in phrases, pitch, loudness, and duration, the ability to sustain sounds, and so on. So this is an overview of the scoring sheet in an upcoming manual that may look a little bit different because we're going to be adding some additional evaluation items to make it a little bit easier for people to have a choice of some items. The VB-map also appears in a VB-map app designed by Steve and Liz Mayer, and I've put their URL up there. It is an electronic system for scoring and administering the VB-map. You can see some screenshots. Here are the assessment areas, milestones, barriers, transitions. They mention the ESA and then the task analysis. The VB-map app, it also is available in Spanish as well as a French version. And this is the section on the regular VB-map, well, VB-map app, but also on the book form, the paper form of where the echoic skill occurs at level 1 and level 2 on this scoring sheet. This is also a excuse me, also a screenshot from the VB-map app on specific to scoring parts of the ESA. And this is group 1, group 2, group 3. You'll see in group 1, they're one syllable or reduplicated syllables. There's some scoring that you can see, X's for full credit and a slash mark for partial credit. So let's take a look at the ESA groups. Group 1 is, the task is to repeat one syllable auditory stimulus consistently, which means every time. Consistently here, I don't mean that they repeat it perfectly, but that when you say something, they say something, so that you can evaluate whether that something that they repeated is accurate or not. You'll see mostly vowels, simple consonants. Some of the consonants that come in first developmentally are lip sounds like P, B, and M. Vowels and diphthongs, of course, come in before consonants. And diphthongs, in case you're not aware of that or familiar with that term, it's more than one vowel together, like I or ow or oi. And so a reduplicated syllable would be where you say the same thing twice, like bye-bye or mama or wah-wah, no, papa. Those are the items from group 1. So if they're not able to repeat one syllable auditory stimulus consistently, then you can discontinue giving the ESA for now. It's not time to give it, and reinforce any echoic response, even if the articulation is wrong, until you get consistent, reliable responding for every auditory model that you give them. Let me mention something about an echoic response. Of course, we know that echoic is point-to-point correspondence with the model. So in this case, it's more like an echoic analog. If it's not correct, then it's not point-to-point correspondence. But we're talking about echoic training. So I may use that term, an echoic response, even when I'm talking about articulation that doesn't quite hit the mark. So the task in group 1, as I said, is to repeat one syllable, but the question really is, do they repeat the vowels correctly and the diphthongs correctly? This is a must. It has to be in place in order for fluent speech to develop. And the other question that you want to ask yourself with group 1 that you're really looking to find out is, do they repeat a reduplicated syllable combination? Again, where it's the same syllable twice or more than twice. So some treatment tips that you would glean from scoring group 1 is by asking yourself, did the vowels stay stable? And if not, then you work on getting correct vowels in man context with echoic prompts. And then you can ask yourself if the early consonants are in place. Some misarticulation is common with early speakers, but you want to know, are the early consonants beginning to appear? Some of the lip sounds, what's happening there? If not, then you can work on consonant vowel or vowel consonant syllables in echoic man context. And reduplicated syllables are fine as targets. In fact, you may want to reduplicate more than twice. You might want to have them practice just vocalizing ma, 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 ba, 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 things like that. So in group 2, the task is to repeat a 2-syllable combination when the syllables are not, just a minute, I have something blocking my screen here. Let me see if I can move this down here. Okay, to repeat a 2-syllable comma when the syllables are not reduplicated. And so if you look at some of the items in group 2 and the consonants that we've added, some of the back consonants, K, G, some of the tongue tip consonants, T and D, and then the lip gets in there with F consonant and so on. You can see already that it's much more complex, the construction of the syllables. And so with baby, for example, the first item, we're reduplicating the consonant, but the vowel changes. And so that's much more difficult for early learners. So the task is to determine whether or not the vowels change appropriately. And what will happen often is if children are having difficulty changing the vowel from, for example, bay to b in the word baby, you might find that they reduplicate the syllable combination instead. And so you hear bebe or baba instead of baby, because that's easier. And they're maintaining fluency. And as you'll see throughout the talk, fluency is really the name of the game. And then ask yourself, are consonants at least in the ballpark? Are you hearing some consonants? And where are they? And which ones are they? They don't all have to be perfect, but we want to see whether or not they're beginning to be used and they're beginning to emerge. And above all is the phrase uttered fluently in normal time. And this is key because if a child has to slow down to say it right, then we know that that syllable combination is too difficult. So treatment tips or information from group 2 is, do the vowels change appropriately? And if not, work on simple 2-syllable combinations where the vowel changes. And so what you would do is move from reduplicated, where the vowel doesn't change and the consonant doesn't change, to changing it. So ba-ba or be-be, baby. Mama, mommy, those kinds of back and forth. So they begin to find the correct tongue placement for these changing vowels and in the future changing consonants while maintaining fluency. And as I said, you might want to contrast the 2-syllable combos where the vowel changes with 2-syllable reduplicated combos where the vowel doesn't change. And again, are the consonants correct? Are they in the ballpark? Keep in mind that baby talk and misarticulations are tolerated by the verbal community for years and years and years. Children of 4, 5, 6 years old still mispronounce many words, but they're fluent. And so if the consonants are not correct and not in the ballpark, then you can work on simple 2-syllable combinations, again, in a echoic man context. I'm not talking about a echoic drill. We want to put it into functional verbal behavior. So manned context, tact, echoic prompted tact contexts as well. And by simple, what I mean is that we're looking at the consonants that have already been mentioned in group 1 and in group 2. Reduplicated syllables are okay here as targets, but you're going to have to track the ability to change vowels. And as their ability improves and that skill improves, then you want to upgrade the targets as soon as possible. Be sure to prioritize fluency. Don't stretch the syllables in order to get accuracy instead of fluency. Fluency is key. So we don't, if they can only say it slowly, then the complexity of the phoneme combination, the syllable combination is too much. So the group 3 task is to repeat a 3-syllable combination, changing vowels and consonants appropriately, but maintaining fluent articulation movements. So you can see here with group 3 that we've got consonant changes from syllable to syllable and vowel changes from syllable to syllable. Some treatment tips is making sure that the vowels are changing appropriately or over the more complex combination. If not, then you have to step back in complexity. Work between 2-syllable and 3-syllable combinations, like, for example, baby and my baby, or baby and baby 1, baby, baby 2, something like that, so that it really doesn't matter what that third, it could be O or or any simple vowel that you're putting in this phrase. But again, in verbal behavior contexts. And as I said before, you may need to contrast 2-syllable reduplicated combinations with the third syllable adding the complexity as opposed to the complexity coming from a vowel change. So mama, mama, me. And again, track whether the consonants are correct. And what we see as 3 syllables begin to be uttered by early learners, early speakers, we get more misarticulations. That's very common, and that's due to maintaining fluency. The verbal community highly values fluency over accuracy in early speakers. And so this complexity, this difficulty comes from trying to put the tongue in the right place. Rapid vowel changes, you'll see a video in a bit about what that looks like. So you want to work on simple, and again, simple is relative. It depends on what consonants have already entered the repertoire and are firm in there. So, but those are the consonants that, as you identify them, you would use to come up with 3-syllable combinations, and again, in functional contexts. And at this point of treatment, the target should not require reduplicated syllables. If they can only reduplicate, if they can only produce a 3-syllable combination that's reduplicated, then you need to step back and capture that earlier skill of being able to move from a reduplicated like mama to adding a 3rd syllable. Keep the consonant the same if you want, but the vowel has to change, like mama, mama, me. And again, prioritize fluency. Don't stretch the syllables in order to get accuracy over fluency. By stretching the syllables, I mean having them slow down and try and say it perfectly correctly. So group 4 and group 5, again, we're just looking at the ability to emphasize sounds, the ability to vary pitch, loudness, and duration. Treatment tips, it's unlikely that direct treatment will be needed for prosthetic issues, especially in early speakers. I wouldn't worry about it too much if they're monotone or if their loudness is off or their pitch is off a little bit. As the verbal community reinforces verbal behavior, those kinds of changes, the music that accompanies what it is we're saying, that is how we're saying it, will usually fall into place just fine. And said another way, the contingencies of reinforcement that maintain fluency and verbal behavior, that is language, are likely to evoke and maintain the prosodic features as well. So let's just take a quick look at the components of speaking. There are two. We have segments, we have segmental components, and supra or above the segments, supra-segmental components. Segmental components are vowels, consonants, the phonemes, and then strings of those syllables that then become words. Of course, a syllable is, let's take the syllable or a, for example. That's also a word, but a word refrigerator has 5 syllables in it. And so that's why I like to, during treatment, look at syllable strength, the skill with producing number of syllables, not number of words. And then on top of that, that is, what do we do with the vowels, so, diphthongs, consonants, syllables? We say them louder or softer. We increase our pitch and our duration, and our voicing is sometimes on and sometimes off, depending on the particular consonant. For example, the consonant T or T sound has no voicing with it. The vocal cords are not in action during that time, but the cognate of that, the other phoneme that we make in exactly the same spot in our mouth, D, or the D sound, we turn the vocal cords on. And so the only difference between a T and a D is that the voicing is on for D or D, and off for T or T. So let's take a look at some videos where the ESA is being administered, and I'll make some points. Here's group 1, and daddy is playing with daughter, and he's assessing one syllable from group 1, one syllable or reduplicated. One tip, if it's at all possible, I would suggest that you just videotape giving the ESA and then go back and score it. It's really difficult, I think, to kind of try to score and give the items at the same time. Oop. See if we can get that video.
Great job. Thank you very much.
You get some tea? Look. More of these. And moo.
Moo.
Moo. What's a cow say?
Moo.
Yeah. So if you say we,
Me.
say we.
Me.
Yeah. You want some more? Here. Some more tea?
Mama.
Daddy drinks it?
1 lump of sugar in my tea, please. Have you
Some more
tried
of
the
these.
yellow brown chips?
Sophie,
Really
say
yummy.
wow.
Wow. Red tea is
Say
ready.
wow.
Would you please fill our cup?
Sophie, say hop.
Hop.
Say hop. Sophie, say hop.
Hop.
More tea?
Can you
Some tea for
please
Daddy?
pass the
Have some?
purple oval treat? Yummy.
Okay. Here we're looking at group 2, which is 2 syllables. And now we have mommy with daughter.
Are you gonna mix? Mix. Mix. Sugar? Oh, yes. Can you say baby?
Baby.
Oh, do you want baby now? Yeah. Okay, Grandma will get you baby. Stay here. Stay here, Grandma will get baby. Hey.
Hi.
Hi. I get it for you, okay?
Okay. And here we have group 3, 3 syllables being administered.
You want both of them?
Yeah.
Okay, you gotta be a really good listener. Are you gonna be a good listener?
Yeah.
Okay, can I have some big tins? Tins. And fold your hands. There you go. And can you say one cookie?
Cookie.
Mm-hmm. And say one cookie.
Cookie.
Uh-huh. And can you say open up?
Up.
Nice. And can you say peanut hat?
Baby. Ha.
Uh-huh. And let's try it again. Fold your hands.
Yeah.
And say peanut hat.
Baby. Ha.
Mm-hmm. And can you...
Okay. You notice on this that the vowels are almost all correct and the fluency is fine. The consonants are not, they're off, but they're age appropriately wrong. They're acceptable. And that's what we want to know. Here's another example of group 3.
Potato. Can you say go bye-bye?
Bye.
Can you say go bye-bye?
Do.
Go bye-bye.
Bye.
Can you say...
So this is an interesting clip because we're looking to see whether or not she can repeat 3 syllables, go bye-bye, and we get bye-bye, or we get go, but we don't get go bye-bye together. And so that's important information to know that she can produce a 2-syllable reduplicated combination. She can keep the vowel accurate. She can produce the consonants as well. Fluency is fine, but 3 syllables are difficult. There's no treatment is needed at this point. She's very little and she will get it. But I like this clip because it points out that with many of the learners that we have, we get stuck at that point. And it's nice to know that what you can do now is evaluate, oh, this is what they can do. This is what they're having trouble with. We can toggle back and forth. This is an example of when to stop giving Isa, this little boy you saw a few minutes ago. You could either give the group 3 or any of the groups really in short little segments when your learner has had enough, but he clearly has had enough, and you wouldn't want to score his performance with his responses at this point because he's been there a long time, and I don't feel that they're probably that reliable because nothing has changed except the session has gone on and on. We're still looking at 3-syllable combinations, which he did very well with in the beginning of the segment, and now we're at the end of some period of time and it's too long.
Oh, punch your belly. There you go. And can you say TP vote?
Pee ba ba ba.
Good trying. Can you say TP vote?
P ba.
And can you say TP vote? You got it. You got it. Say
Yeah.
TP vote.
Pee ba.
And what happened was then we started getting errors with some of the vowels as well. And we don't want to see that, and we don't want to have to score it like that. And so time to stop, pick it up tomorrow or later, some other time. We also don't want sitting with the therapist and working on saying things echoically to become aversive. So in this next segment, I'd like to talk a bit about speech production and present some speech production basics and provide you with some, I don't think too detailed information, but useful information about what's going on when we're trying to talk so that we clearly understand the enormity of the task that we're asking children to do when they learn to echo. So what is normal speech? Well, it's fluent, very fluent, fast, and it's acceptably articulated. That is, articulation is precise, certainly in sophisticated speakers. By the time you're grown up, you usually don't have many articulation errors, or if you do, you can just do some specific drill with a therapist and some good guidance to fix that. I found out when I was about 20 that I had a lisp, and I needed to get that fixed in order to continue on my chosen path of speech pathology. And so it still pops out there from time to time, but that was no longer acceptably wrong. So maybe I should have said acceptably imprecise, because children that are learning to speak often have imprecise articulation, but it's acceptable to a certain point. And it's important to sort of give your learner a break by understanding, is this what typically developing speakers would be sounding like after this many months of talking? So what do we mean by fluent, fast, acceptably precise articulation? Many syllables are produced on one breath, like saying, let's go to the movies tonight. 8 syllables, I didn't take a breath. We have on and off vocal fold movement to produce voiced and voiceless sounds. So this is phonetically written, the word water, and 3 of the 4 phonemes, the vocal folds are on, they're moving, but we have to turn them off in order to say the T sound. And so that's why we don't say water, water, we say water, because the D sound allows us to keep the vocal cords on, because D is a voiced consonant, and that helps us maintain fluency. So these kinds of changes that we make are fast adjustments, and we have to do that in order for the tongue to move from one tongue position to another. And where it moves, as we'll see as we go along, varies for any given sound, and it depends on where the next sound is, the adjacent sounds before and after. So for example, well, let me hold on that example, and we'll take a look at a specific one in a couple of minutes. So the tongue position varies for any given sound depending on the requirements of the tongue position, depending on the tongue position requirements of the adjacent sounds. So speech acquisition is really a combination of 3 processes. It's a behavioral process, a mechanical process, and a process that we call co-articulation. The teacher skills that you need to teach a child to get the behavioral process in place is stimulus control. You have to be able to analyze controlling stimuli. So you should be asking yourself, do I have these skills? It's a mechanical process. Does the person have correct vocal anatomy? And do I know what that anatomy looks like? Do I understand how sounds are produced? Do I understand where sounds are positioned in them, where the tongue and other speech articulators are in the mouth? Do I understand about manner productions, like sounds that go through the nasal cavity versus sounds that are continuous airflow sounds, and so on? Do I understand normal speech acquisition? And do I understand how to sequence syllables that I've selected as targets? And then the co-articulation process, as a teacher, I need to know how the position of one phoneme being produced will affect the adjacent sounds. This is key when I select targets. And do I understand how to train syllable fluency? These are all of the teacher skills that are needed. The learner skill that's needed for these three processes is echoic. So let's talk for a minute about the behavioral process. Vocalizations in the behavioral process come under the control of the contingencies of reinforcement of those sounds. So here we have sound making practice. I'm just gonna move me down a little bit on this slide. Sound making practice and echoic practice. So sounds come under the contingency of reinforcement during this process of just practicing making sounds, and so that we get mans, tags, interverbals, and echoics in place. In other words, vocal practice yields audible sounds, it yields many sounds, it yields varied sounds, and it yields fluent and sustained sounds. Here's an example of sound making practice with some echoic skills beginning to emerge.
Hey, what you got to say? What you got to say, huh, boo? Wah, 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 wah. Uh-huh, and then what happened? And then what happened? Blah, 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 blah? It's blah, 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 blah?
So you see the difficulty in the echoic skill at the age of 6 months. It's not in place yet, but it's beginning to be in place through the contingencies of reinforcement. Here's an example of normal speech. It's age appropriate, imprecisely so. Baby talk is acceptably imprecise. But the speech is very fluent. The tongue is moving easily from one position to another, lots of syllables on one breath, and speech is being reinforced. Okay, so let's just keep in mind that what we've been seeing is mostly vocal behavior. right on the cusp of becoming vocal verbal behavior. This baby is 3 months old and we don't have any vocal verbal behavior yet. At least in this clip, we don't see it, but lots and lots of vocal practice, primarily vowels. And vocal verbal behavior is probably in place um, with some skills. It's kind of hard to know exactly what they are. Maybe intraverbal at this point, but of course, articulation is very difficult to understand. Maybe I love you in there. I'm not quite sure. So the current skill for both of these children is unreliable vocal responding to an echoic model. They're both being given echoic models, auditory models that they would reinforce as echoics, but they're also reinforcing almost anything that the child is saying, and that's what we want. That's where it should be.
There. Hi. Agoo. Yes. You tell me. Uh-huh. What else?
We saw a lot of tongue movement here, lots of practicing with vowels, but they're really unreliable. The baby is just too young at 3 months to be able to really hit the mark. But that's fine. What we need is practice right now. And I'll play the little boy that we saw a few minutes ago, just kind of as a reminder that we are beginning to get some echoic responses, but controlling precise echoics is beyond the skill of this baby at this point, but that's fine. This is 6 months, and we think that dad, if he's working with daddy, he should keep doing what he's doing because it's absolutely perfect.
Hey, what you got to say? What you got to say, huh, boo? Wah, 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 wah. Uh-huh, and then what happened? And then what happened? Wah, 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 wah? It's wah, 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 wah?
So we've got lots of echoic practice kind of embedded in an intraverbal context as well, what you got to say for yourself and so on. This baby is, I believe, 15 months to 18 months, somewhere in there. And you can see that we still have imprecise articulation, but we have fluent speech. rapid, the ability to produce more than one syllable on a breath, more than, I think, 3 syllables on a breath. So that's coming into place as well. And what we have are tacks, and we have some imitation skills, and I believe interverbals as well. It's been a while since I've seen this video, but let's take a look. This is normal speech for this age.
Kaden, can you say mama?
Papa.
Can you say dada? Good job. Can you say fish? Fish. Can you say cracker? Cracker. Can you say ball?
Ball.
How about car? Can you say car? Car. Can you say bye-bye?
Papa.
How about...
Papa.
Good job. What does a duck say? Quack. How about a dog? Woof. What does a dinosaur do? Roar. What does a crab do? Pinch, pinch, pinch. Can you cough? Can you smile? Good job. Can you laugh? Laugh. Can you laugh? Do you love mama? Kaden, do you love mom? You do. Can you say bye-bye to the camera? Say bye-bye. Use your words.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so how do we get from one spot to the next? Vocal behavior comes first. And so it doesn't matter if your learner is 3 months old or 3 years old or 13 years old. If you don't have vocal behavior with lots and lots of practice so that the vowels begin to be uttered fluently, several vowels together on one breath, that's where you want to start. Now, you want to put those as soon as possible into manned context, tact context, just like we saw in the videos of the really early learners, really young learners. But the vocal practice has to come first. And then contingencies of reinforcement act upon that vocal behavior such that it is strengthened into functional vocal verbal behavior. And of course, the thing that helps with all of this process is an echoic skill. So the second process that defines speech acquisition is that it's a mechanical process. And this is an overview of some of the various parts of our body that we call the speech production mechanism. And I'm not going to dwell on this because we have a video that beautifully describes all of this, and you get to see it in real time via an MRI. So we'll move to that. Let me just move through the components of speaking. And the video is called How the Vocal Organs Work by Dr. Jeff Lindsay, and I'm going to play it in its entirety. It's about 7 minutes long, and it's one of the best videos I think I've seen to really kind of encompass everything that I think a beginner would need to know to clearly understand what's going on when we're talking.
Everyone knows we have lungs, a beating heart, and a digestive system, but most folks are amazed when they see the inner life of speech. Today, with the help of magnetic resonance imaging, I'm going to introduce you to what goes on inside you when you speak. The video we'll be looking at is from SPAN at the University of Southern California. I've put the link to all their videos below. First, let's just watch 20 seconds. The sound quality is a bit weird to filter out the noise of the MRI scanner, But there's nothing weird about this guy's speech. Everything you see now happens inside you every time you talk.
How do I like LA? I like LA quite a bit. I think everyone always asks you that, actually. It's the one city, I think, that I've ever lived in where everyone asks you if you like it or not. But what I always tell people is that everyone hates LA for 6 months or a year, and then they kind of tolerate it for another year, and then after that they love it.
Okay, what I'm going to do is break this down into the 4 gateways of speech. When you speak, the muscles inside move your jaw and lips so that your mouth alternates between being more open and more closed. It tends to be more open for vowels and more closed for consonants. Watch how the lips close the mouth gateway completely for this B in but.
But.
The mouth can also be obstructed by putting your bottom lip on your teeth, like in this V in everyone.
Everyone.
The opening and closing of the mouth is such a basic pattern that if that's all we see, we can easily suspend disbelief and interpret it as speaking.
Dreams are how we figure out where we want to go. Life is how we get there.
As you start to speak, muscles in your throat bring your larynx or voice box into play at the top of your windpipe.
How do I like LA?
You speak for a few seconds, then inhale quickly. Then speak again for a few seconds, then inhale again, and so on. So speech is a modified way of exhaling. Inside the larynx, voice is made by the vocal cords or vocal folds vibrating. Here's a photo of my vocal folds. If you're squeamish, look away now. Looking down my throat from above, here are my vocal folds, almost closing the gateway to the lungs below. And this is a stroboscopic video, not me, that shows in slow motion how the folds vibrate when they make voiced speech. You may not have noticed the nose much in the video, but it's vital to control whether or not your breath can escape through your nose. That means another gateway, and it's here at the back. The soft palate is the squishy rear part of the roof of your mouth that ends in the dangly uvula.
Well, here I am again.
The photos I showed you before of my vocal folds were taken by passing a fiber optic camera up my nostril, through my nasal cavity, and down behind my soft palate. When you're just breathing, your soft palate hangs down, so the breath can get behind it and go in and out through the nasal cavity. Now, as soon as you're about to speak, the soft palate lifts up against the back of the throat and blocks off the nose.
But what I always tell people is
It mainly stays there while you're speaking, but drops down briefly for nasal speech sounds. Let's look at the words 6 months, where the soft palate drops down just for the nasal portion, mun.
6 months. 6 months. 6 months.
If you actually want to feel this gateway, you can try snickering loudly through your nose. That's air squeezing through the soft palate gateway. Or try this, blow through your lips as if you were blowing out birthday candles. Next, just breathe out through your nose. Now, take a deep breath and try quickly switching from the blowing to the nose breathing. Inside at the back, you should be able to feel the soft palate dropping to allow air out through your nose. Of course, the star of the show is your tongue, and it's not just the part that you can push outside. The ways in which the tongue acts as a gateway are complex. In fact, the tongue in action looks like an entire animal in its own right. The forward part is like the head of this badger. It can move around, and the tip can be lifted up to touch your teeth and palate. Now, the rear part can be relatively low and flat, or bunched up towards the roof of your mouth, like this badger arching its back. This big rear part may be out of sight and out of mind, but it's crucial for sounds like y as in yes, and k and g as in cargo, and for vowels. So let's put everything together and look at how you say the word think. For this word, your mouth is going to be somewhat open throughout. First, you raise the tip of your tongue, like the snout of the badger, to touch your teeth. Also, the TH sound th is voiceless, so your larynx gateway briefly opens up a bit. Then, while your tongue tip retreats from your teeth, your tongue body starts to bunch like the badger's back for the I vowel. Next, it arches right up to touch the roof of your mouth, and simultaneously, your soft palate lowers for the sound. For the K, your soft palate has to shut this gateway, like so. Then your tongue gateway is opened rapidly, making the explosive sound K. This sound is also voiceless and happens to be at the end of a phrase, so the speaker now takes a breath. And now here's the whole word in real time.
Think, 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 think.
On average, we produce several words every second. That speaker averages between 3 and 4. We can only perform this miracle because we spent years learning to do it in our early lives, even though we don't remember any of that now.
Look right here.
So learning to speak a different way, changing your accent, learning to pronounce a foreign language well, is something that generally takes commitment and practice, like skateboarding or learning a musical instrument. The key thing is to enjoy it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like it and subscribe, and please share it with anyone who might find it interesting. Until next time, take care.
Okay, yeah, really good video to kind of put it all together about the mechanical process and the requirements that we're imposing on children as they learn to speak, but also that they must master in order for what they're saying, the sounds that they're saying, to come under the contingencies of reinforcement. So moving into the third process, we call it co-articulation. And co-articulation is simply what happens when fluency is prioritized during ongoing speech. If fluency is not prioritized, for example, precision is prioritized, like the requirements in a tongue twister, then fluency is abandoned for the sake of precision. And we don't get any co-articulation or very little. But co-articulation, that is the adjustments in tongue position to accommodate the requirements of tongue position of the adjacent sounds for any given phoneme, any given sound, that will happen automatically while we're maintaining fluency, when fluency is prioritized. And what we know about the verbal community is fluency is highly valued. So it's a balance between accuracy and speed. And we can't speak so fast that we're not accurate, but we don't want to speak so accurately without co-articulation that we are speaking too slowly. And so it's a balance, and co-articulation is a natural process that occurs. Again, it's the tongue placement changes in order to produce a sound is affected by the requirements of the adjacent phoneme positions, the adjacent sounds. So knowing the mechanics of speech production can also help you in target selection. Here's the tongue position for T, D, and N. The tongue tip is kind of behind your front teeth at the top. And here's the tongue position required for the vowel E and the vowel You recall from the video that vowels are require that large part of the tongue. The whole tongue pretty much moves up, down, front, back to produce various vowels. But knowing the mechanics of speech production can help us. So let's say, for example, that we need to select a target, and the child doesn't do very well with either repeating the T phony, the syllable, or T as a syllable. And those might be parts of words of preferred items or activities or something. You can imagine the sound, the syllable T and the syllable T as being parts of important words that a child might need to say. So which one of these syllables might we select if we know the tongue position required for all of these, for the vowels as well as the consonant, the T sound? Well, you can probably see that the tongue position for the E vowel is closer to the tongue position for T than the tongue position for because we have more of the tongue up toward the top of the mouth. So it might require less movement, less co-articulation to move from the T phoneme to the E phoneme as a vowel than to produce T. Very small differences here. And I only use this just as an example so that you can begin to see that knowledge of speech production and the mechanics of it can help you in selecting the right target within a context of mands or tags or intraverbals. So I'd like to play this video for you so that you can this little girl is going to be singing the ABC song. I've transcribed what her actual response is in phonetics and what the correct response is. You can see that by 24 months of age, the vowels are in place and there are many consonant errors, but we wouldn't really worry about that. We care that the vowels are in place and that she's fluent and that she can say lots of syllables on one breath.
How old are you?
2.
Yeah, can you do ABCs? Yay!
This is another example of co-articulation that I mentioned earlier. You can see on the left, written phonetically is the word water, W-A-T-E-R, and then water, W-A-D-D-E-R. Let's take a look at the vocal cords, the requirements. On the left, the vocal cords have to go silent for the T phoneme to be perfectly articulated. And for water, the vocal cords stay on the whole time. So we change our articulation and how we say things to meet the demands of effective communication. If rapid speaking is a demand of effective communication, then we'll say that word as water. But if clarification is required in order to effectively communicate, for example, a waitress saying, "Excuse me, what did you ask for?" Then you might say water to clarify exactly what you meant. Co-articulation is a function of changes that you make in consonant place, that is the place where you produce that consonant, lips, the back of the mouth, the tongue tip on the front of the mouth, or so on. The manner, is this a nasal sound? Is this a plosive that explodes out like the B sound or the P sound or D and T? And voicing, are the vocal cords in action? Are they on or are they off? In order, all of these things, in order to maintain fluency while speaking, our speech undergoes a natural automatic process called co-articulation. So a couple of examples. The T, where you put your tongue in your mouth to say the T in the word put, if there's nothing following that word, is probably slightly different than where you put your tongue to produce the T that comes right before the TH in put the key. Now, if I slow it down, I hit the mark and there is no co-articulation, put the key. But if I say it all together as a rapid 3-syllable combination, we get put the key. And my tongue tip does not go behind, so far behind my front teeth. It almost stays closer to that upcoming position for the TH. Let me point out, that part of the reason that this may happen is because the T sound doesn't require the vocal cords to be on, but the vowel right before in put the key does require vocal cords to be on. The TH sound right afterwards is a voiced sound, the, as in the, requires vocal cords to be on. And so we may very well, the T in put the key almost may not even occur. You may just get that TH sound kind of blended at the end of pu for put the key, or you may get more of a D sound, put the key. And here's another example of, not with T, but with TH, put the key versus this is Teddy. We have different tongue position and possibly a bit different, different tongue position. Enough said on that one. Same thing for the example of mommy and daddy versus mommy and Katie. Mommy and daddy, the N and the D together, the tongue is in virtually the same spot in your mouth. But to say mommy and Katie, the N is in the front and then it has to move to the back to produce the K sound. And so here we have mommy and Katie written on the upper left, mommy and daddy written on the upper right, and just a picture of where your tongue is in your mouth to produce that K sound versus where your tongue is in your mouth, your tongue tip, to produce the N and the D sound. So the point here is that when you say mommy and Katie, it's very likely that saying that N sound next to the K might almost come out like an NG sound, mommy and Katie, almost like the sound at the end of ing. It's why we don't say think, we say think, because of co-articulation. So some take-home summary points. Speech acquisition is a co-articulation process. The correct tongue position is not absolute unless you're working very specifically on specific sounds and you're not trying for fluent speech. Working on single syllables may hinder fluency. So I don't recommend this for early learners, maybe later learners that are trying to clean up their articulation, and maybe in some special circumstances. But I think that would need to be discussed with a speech pathologist to make sure that you're not sacrificing fluency for accuracy. Precision requirements can decrease fluency, as I mentioned, in tongue twisters. Avoid imposing precision requirements at the expense of fluency. This is for early speakers. What I mean by that is focusing on articulation that's too specific or keeping the bar raised so high for perfect articulation is contraindicated for early speech learners if they're not yet producing fluent strings of syllables. In really small children, we call that babbling. Point 6, the verbal community, that all of us who reinforce language, tolerates precision errors for years and years as the mechanical skills are acquired that produce complex rapid movement combinations, that is, fluent connected speech. First, establish fluent, even though maybe misarticulated, syllable strings, and reinforce those syllable strings as mans and tacks and so on, while you're continuing to improve articulation precision and lengthen the syllable strings, the mean length of utterance, and increase the phoneme complexity. So we'll kind of get into a little bit about phoneme complexity here in our last segment of the talk, and that is, how can the ESA inform target selection? Well, let's take a look at different kinds of problems that we might call echoic problems. Number one is there's no response to an echoic model. And so what you want to target is increasing vocalizations in general through stimulus-stimulus pairing, reinforcing almost anything that comes out of the child's mouth, lots of playtime, sound-making practice, sound-making fun during playtime, but certainly nothing that would smack of a requirement to talk. And then the next level up in terms of skill is that you're getting some response to an echoic model, but it's unreliable in occurrence. And so what we want is a vocal response for every single echoic model. So when I say something, you say something. I don't care what it is at first, it doesn't matter what it is, but if it's clearly in a echoic context, I want some kind of a response so that I have some material that I can reinforce and work with. And then the next level up from that in terms of skill is we get a response to every single echoic model. So it's occurring reliably, but it's inaccurate to some degree. Now, what we don't want is inaccurate vowels. That's a big problem. That's a much bigger problem than inaccurate consonants. And so the target for inaccurate responses is to get point-to-point matching on every echoic model. But we're trying to do it not just in an echoic drill context with early learners, but in manned contexts with echoic prompts and tact contexts with echoic prompts. And so we may not get point-to-point matching, but we may get closer approximations through the contingencies of reinforcement. So in terms of the ESA, if we have these three levels of what I labeled echoic problems, sort of, no response to the echoic model, you're not ready to give the ESA. Unreliable responding to an echoic model, maybe you're ready to give some part of the ESA, maybe group one, but maybe you're not ready for it. So be on your toes about whether or not you want to start it or make your way through the whole thing, or maybe wait. And then inaccurate response to an echoic model, I would give the ESA because it can inform target selection. But keep in mind that somebody needs to analyze these errors, and it would be good if you would consult with a speech pathologist in order to do the error analysis, because this might be what they're producing might actually be considered normal. That is, if they were being evaluated, they wouldn't be targeted as a child that needed to get some speech therapy. It might be just normal articulation acquisition, which takes a while to get it right. So let's see, let me just check here and see what the video, yeah. So the next slide is a video that where the child is kind of between no responding to the echoic model and unreliable responding to the echoic model.
Parker says, "Eee! Gah! You can take that. Yeah. Gah! Gah!" Swing says, "Wee!" Parker says, "Wee! Eee!" The swing says, "Wee! Eee! Eee! Parker says, "Eee!" The swing goes, "Wee!" There we go. Good. Good job. Eee! Eee!
So this video really demonstrates also the relaxed sort of setting that you want in doing stimulus pairing, and some direct reinforcement of an echoic mand. Happens to be the E sound that she's working on, but she's also pairing G for go, that will turn into go, into kind of encompassing all of that in this very low key, low stress, fun environment for the child. So specific to treatment, if we have no response to an echoic model, they're not ready for the ESA, what do? We evoke and reinforce any sound making at all, and we track the increases in vocalizations. You can do that through occasionally administering a vocalization baseline or something of that sort. That's what I typically do, where I take a period of time. It might be in 1 minute intervals, or I might do a whole 30-minute interval and just simply transcribe everything that I hear, and then keep track of whether or not what I'm hearing is different than what I heard the last time. If it's different in terms of phonemes, and is it different in terms of frequency? And then unreliable response to an echoic model, maybe they're not ready, maybe they are ready for the ESA. What do? Some possible treatment is to reinforce any vocal response to an echoic model, even if it's wrong. That is not an exact echoic, but it is a reliable response to, it's a vocal response to the model. Don't impose precision requirements at this point. Aim for 100% responding. I often will tell therapists over the course of some period of time, ask them to repeat one by one 100 different syllables, one syllable combos, if they're at this point where they're unreliably responding to an echoic model. It can be, 5 now and 10, 15 minutes from now, or you can break it up any way you want. But once you have 100 of them, you'll be able to get some sort of a percentage and know, are they mostly responding when I give them an echoic model? We've done this walking upstairs, or going for a walk on the sidewalk outside, or really almost any, while they're putting a puzzle together. You want to amass enough data that you can have some sort of an idea of how reliable are they. Once they're responding, to, and you're comfortable saying, yeah, when I say something, they say something back. They're a reliable responder to a vocal model and an auditory model. I'd like to reinforce that as an echoic. Then what you do is you select your targets by the number of syllables and the phoneme complexity that's in those syllables. How many vowels, how many consonants, what kind of consonants, and so on. And that would be information that you could get from the ESA or any other test that evaluates phonemes and phoneme production. And then you're going to teach it in functional verbal behavior context. And I say echoic man, but it could be echoic tact context as well. And then the next level, inaccurate response to echoic models. The responding, what is it like? Well, they're saying something in response reliably 100% of the time, but it might be off the mark. And so you want to get early skills in place in terms of echoics. So what does that mean? We want them to be able to echo at least a few vowels, 2 or 3 vowels to get started. You can start a speech manned training program with 2 or 3 vowels, but they have to have some vowels available. We want to know that they can easily alternate vowels on one breath, 4 or 5 syllables, even 2 or 3 syllables, where you're changing tongue position from one vowel position to another. We want to know that they can easily alternate several consonant vowel and vowel consonant syllables on one breath. So for example, pa, 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 me, or it would be much more complex to have to say uwa bi, because we've got 3 different vowels and 2 consonants thrown in there. And again, you're going to put it in functional contexts. The speech tracker form is just a simple form that I made up that may be helpful to you. I would be happy to send it to you, but you can copy this and use it any way you want. On the left side, the column 1, are some of many of the English consonant sounds. And across the top, row 1, are many of vowel sounds in English. And so what we do is, as we begin to hear these occurring in the child's repertoire, we highlight it. And then we want to ask ourselves, and so we're sort of tracking what sounds we're hearing, not necessarily together, but just what sounds are they making. And then we want to be able to cross-reference these or cross-combine these so that we get vowels and consonants making up some words that we think sound like things that could be turned into commands or tags. Do they sound like preferred items, preferred activities, or items and activities that they use on a daily basis? So here's an example of how we might analyze this. You want to set possibly a group target instead of specific targets. So here's an example of a target statement. Joey will echo simple syllables. And by that, we mean single vowels, that's a syllable, a vowel with a consonant or a consonant with a vowel, or reduplicated, or ma, me, that sort of thing. We want him to be able to do that with at least 2 different vowels and 2 of the early consonants. And we want him to be 100% accurate on any 6 possible combinations that we give him. And we want him to do 3 sets of those 6 possible combos on 10 trials. So a very specific target statement, but what would this look like in terms of your worksheet? So what we do is we start to make a grid, and you can use a speech tracker form for this, or you can just make up a tic-tac-toe sort of a board like what I have on the right-hand side, consonant, vowel, consonant, vowel, consonant. And then you write the sounds that you have heard, both vowels and consonants, and then begin to look for combinations. What can I put with what? And so you can see that I've embedded the vowel within two consonants so that I can possibly look for words like mom or BB, which would be consonant, vowel, reduplicated. But just with this simple grid here, we have 28 possible combinations. We have these two vowels that the child can say. And so we could work on reduplicating those. Then the child can also say the M sound and the B sound. So we could put those with the two vowels and put the consonant at the end. And if they can do that, we could even reduplicate that so that they're reduplicating the vowel consonant, ab, im, and so on. Now you can't have a syllable with just a consonant or a consonant reduplication. That's not a syllable. You need a vowel in English. So we could put the consonant with the vowel and get ma, ba, mi, or b, or we could reduplicate those, or we could get a consonant, vowel, consonant. And we have mom and a bunch of other sounds. Now, this might look odd. It might not even look like something that you think you want to teach the child, but just kind of bear with me here because we'll see how this might all actually be useful and come together. So this is a sequence of complexity or difficulty. We have a single syllable, ba, mi, and ma. These are phonetic sounds. The I sounds like E in phonetics. Then we could reduplicate that. That's a little bit harder than, or maybe not, but it definitely is easier than alternating the vowels where the consonant stays the same, but the vowel changes. So this information is good to have, as well as information about where you make the various sounds, because in general, it may be possible that front consonants are acquired before the consonants where you use the roof of your mouth, or they're called alveolar consonants like T and D. So for example, it might be easier for the child to say mommy than to say daddy. It might not, but that might be a place to start. And by the same token, roof of the mouth in the front consonants that we call alveolar consonants might be easier than the velar consonants, where the tongue has to bunch up toward the soft palate to make the K sound. Certainly, if you want the child to look at your mouth, which is debatable whether that's a good idea to do or not, because we don't usually do that as we're learning to talk. You can't even see where the tongue is for the K sound. So it might be that Teddy would be easier, or daddy would be more easily acquired than cookie. And it's important just to point out that typical acquisition may not follow this sequence exactly, but if you find that your learner requires speech teaching, this kind of sequence and knowing this sequence is useful. So the treatment goal for inaccurate responding, that is saying something, but it's not point-to-point correspondence is to establish fluent vocal mands and tacks at whatever precision levels are consistent with the age that they've been speaking. Now, if they're 13 and they've only started making sounds 3 months ago, that's the level you want to really evaluate. What level are we at? So we're not talking about chronological age. We're talking about how much practice have they had while they've been on the planet in making vocalizations. And that's really critical. That's what you want to evaluate, which is why I think that there probably is hope that someone could achieve speech and sound making, certainly if they have the correct anatomy, but they haven't acquired connected fluent vocalizations yet. And years have gone by. I think there certainly is hope and would require careful evaluation and careful monitoring and tracking, but in general, I would say it's probably worth a try with older learners. And then you want to reinforce intelligibility, and that means that you're going to reinforce verbal targets that are based on their current skill and what typical speakers can say if they've been speaking for the same amount of time. And then you're going to work to increase syllable complexity, which we've kind of been talking about. This is an example of a child with emerging verbal behavior skills, both echoic as well as mantact and intraverbal. The speech is, for the most part, intelligible. Consonants, some consonants are not in place yet, but we have fluent speech and we have accurate vowels.
Okay, which one does not belong?
Dolphin.
How come?
No dolphin. Guy.
What?
No dolphin.
The dolphin doesn't belong. Do you know why?
Why?
Because these are all what?
Vehicle.
They're all vehicles. Is a dolphin a vehicle?
No.
No, that's silly, isn't it? But a dolphin, do you know where a dolphin lives?
How rich?
Say, where does it live?
How rich?
Say, where?
Where?
The dolphin lives in the water.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it swims. Okay, can we do another one?
Yeah.
All right, close your eyes. Close them, keep them closed, keep them closed. Are they still closed?
Yeah.
Are you peeking?
Yeah.
All right. Now, that's really big. Which one does not belong?
Monkey.
Are you sure?
No.
You're not sure?
Yeah.
You are? How come?
How come? No monkey. The guy.
The monkey doesn't live in the sky?
No.
Can a monkey fly?
No.
No, but a monkey swings in the trees, doesn't he? All right, nice job. You're too smart, aren't you? Yeah.
So you can see that he came a long way with his speech and his language learning, functional operants, after being given the ESA and getting tired at group 3. But what we did was we began to sort of toggle back and forth with syllable complexity while imposing the contingencies of reinforcement for man's tax and intraverbals, and got a good result. This is kind of another format for tracking, like that speech tracker, for sort of tracking what your learner can do and what you're going to do about it in terms of turning their current speech skills into possible targets or mands. And so if you look at the middle section, target selection worksheet sample, where it says available sounds, you can see again that I've embedded the vowel column that's in yellow with 2 consonant columns on both sides, and I just didn't finish filling it out, but I could have put the very same consonants again in the next consonant column and the very same vowels in the next vowel column, so that I could begin to do sort of that cross-referencing and beginning to play around with putting syllables together into something that matched high preference items that we've already identified for this child. Like, for example, juice, or I had another one at the top of my mind. I'm just not thinking of what it is right now. But then what you want to do is turn you want to match up the possible combination of available sounds into syllables, match those with high preference items that sort of sound like that, or components of it sound like that. And then that becomes your target selection process. Oh yes, there they are. Chips, juice, and music are 3 things that the child liked. And so for juice, we could select T because it's kind of similar to the J sound, certainly more similar, T is more similar to J than the B sound is. And he's already got the vowel in that word juice, in that syllable. So we would just simply teach 2 as a beginning mand for juice, and then begin to shape improvement in the articulation as we go along and as skill improves. So in group 3, let's take a look at let's take a look at these combinations. So we have 3 syllables. We have no reduplications all by themselves. We do have go, bye-bye. Bye-bye is a reduplication, but with go, that we would not call that a reduplicated 3-syllable phrase. But the vowels change as well as the consonants. But the consonants are still within what we would call a developmental level for early learners, certainly under the age of, I would think, 3 or 4 or 5. These are consonants that we begin to see and that they begin to master accuracy with. So we'll be talking about the phrase tubby toy here in a minute, but you can see as we go through the skill set required for producing the T phoneme within context. First, we want some vowels to be emitted with that consonant. Of course, we want the vowels even without the consonant. But if we're beginning to look at words that have the T sound in them, like tubby toy, for example, these are the skills that have to be acquired. First, they have to be able to say a syllable with some main vowels, and they have to be able to repeat that 3 times in 1 second. Ta, 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 ti, 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 tu, 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 reduplicated, normal speech fluency duration. And they have to be able to repeat the T sound now with different vowels. Ta, ti, tu, tu, ta, ti, tu, ta, and so on. Now, we may not drill with those things unless the learner is older and is trying to clean up some sloppy articulation. But these are the kinds of things that will occur, combinations that will occur naturally with vocal practice, sound making practice, like what we saw in some of the earlier videos with some of the 6-month-old babies and a little bit older. And then we need to change the consonant as we're changing the vowels. And so alternated 3-syllable combinations with different consonants and different vowels. So let's take a look at these phrases that all have T sounds in them. Tubby toy to my house and take me to. And I have written them here in phonetics, which is helpful in coming up with your targets. And we'll see why here in just a moment. So let's take tubby toy. In red, I've written what the phonemes are in order that are required. So we have the T phoneme and then the vowel, the B phoneme, and then the E vowel, another T phoneme, and then the Oi diphthong. Now, let's just say that our learner says tutoy instead of tubby toy. That's not unusual. We might hear that, and depending on age and skill, speech skill of the learner, that might get reinforced just fine. How do you decide what to choose as a target and how difficult that target might be, and if you're choosing the right target in the right sequence? So here's tubby toy at the top of this table. Well, it's not really supposed to be a table, but then we've got what the child currently says, tutoy, in yellow. And then underneath that, we have tutta. So what's required to say tubby toy correctly are 2 different consonants and 3 different vowels. So consonant 1 and vowel 1, consonant 2 and vowel 2, and consonant 1 and vowel 3, ta, be, toy, for the 3 syllables. So we have 3 syllables with 2 consonants and 3 vowel changes. This is what the child can do right now. He can produce 2 consonants, 2 syllables with 1 consonant staying stable and 2 vowels. Now, the reduplicated syllable of that is tutta. 1 consonant, 1 vowel, 2 syllables. So what we know about this learner is that the current skill is higher than reduplicated skill, but is not yet at the 3-syllable level where multiple consonant changes are required and multiple vowel changes. It's too hard. And so what we get is the deletion of a whole syllable. Now, not every child will do that. We might get tata toy, where some child would repeat a 3-syllable, but the middle one might be wrong. It might be reduplicated, tata, and then toy. But in any case, it's not as difficult as the 2 consonants and 3 vowel changes that are required, 3 different vowels that are required to be emitted in a correct tubby toy. So this kind of an analysis is really useful, and it's why I like to use phonetics, particularly with vowels, so that you can see what's required and what's too hard and where do we want to go. So what would we do in this case? We want to reinforce most first vocal attempts for learners with weak vocal repertoires, or if they have any behavioral issues at all. We want to embed vocal practice into most activities, and we want to give echoic prompts as they're needed. And then we want to simplify the target components if the vocal attempts are unintelligible, or if we're getting significant loss, like, for example, whole syllables being left out. And then we want to toggle back and forth. Let me see if I can go back. We want to toggle back and forth here between what he can do and what he can't yet do. But if you're able to track how many consonant changes are there and how many vowel changes are there, then you'll very easily be able to come up with some 3-syllable combinations and decide, oh, that was too many vowel changes, or ooh, that was too many consonant change, too much consonant change, or maybe too many syllables. But you want to continue to toggle back and forth so that eventually they will acquire the higher level skill, higher meaning more complex. And how do they do that? By co-articulation with fluent sound making practice and the contingencies of reinforcement at work. And I'd like to end my presentation with a short video of some administration tips with respect to the ESA. I was asked to prepare a video for the VBMAP app. And this will be, I don't know if it's up yet on their new version of the app, or if that's in the wings, if it's almost ready. But I recently recorded this video, and I think it's a good way to end because it kind of puts it all together in terms of responding to some concerns that people have, some errors that they're making. So let's take a look at this. Hi, everyone. I'm Barb Ash, author of the Early Echoic Skills Assessment. I'm going to make a few general comments about the test, and then some tips and comments about the 5 groups that make up the test. First point is the ESA isn't meant as a full-fledged articulation test. It's more of a quick snapshot of early vocal skills that the learner should be developing regardless of their age. Echoic skills are typically acquired by the time the learner is about 30 months of age, but that doesn't mean that speech is perfect at that point. It just means that the early speaker is learning to repeat what he or she hears someone else say, and it may not be a perfect echoic match. So we're trying to get a handle on that. So instead of thinking about the chronological age of your learner, consider how long they've been making sounds, and that's kind of what you're trying to assess. Which brings me to the second point. Regardless of their age, if the learner isn't vocalizing very much, then the ESA may not be informative, may not be helpful. You can simply try giving a few items, and if there's no echoic response, you can stop giving the test and mark it accordingly, and then plan to try later when there's more vocalizations occurring. And by contrast, if your learner already can repeat some 3-syllable phrases, even though it may not be a perfect echoic match, then the ESA is probably not needed in this case either. You can simply give full credit for it on the VBMAP and move on. I think that ESA is most useful to give us some insight into those learners who are just beginning to vocalize syllables and are inconsistent at repeating or echoing. For these learners, the ESA can yield a score that indicates how strong this fledgling echoic skill is. It's sort of a barometer that tells us whether or not we should do some teaching with the verbal skill, the echoic, which brings me to point 3. The items on the ESA are definitely not meant to be teaching targets. They're good as test items because they let us assess a couple of critical vocal skills. And one is the ability to repeat a certain number of syllables in a row without taking a breath. And the other is the integrity of the vowels and the consonants. If you increase the number of syllables, do the vowels stay true and accurate? And what happens to the consonants? Do some of them get left out or substituted or whatever? So this means that the test items themselves are really arbitrary as long as they meet the criteria of the right number of syllables and the sounds that are typical at that developmental level that we're trying to test for. So I'll give specific tips when we're talking about the groups, but the point is that you can change the items. My last general comment is to remember that it's not necessary to give the whole test all at once in one sitting. It's fine to give it also when the learner is doing something else, like playing with a puzzle or playing with toys or whatever. Okay, these and other suggestions and clarifications and additions will come in the ESA manual that I'm working on. In the meantime, here are some specific tips and comments per group. Group 1 of the ESA, remember it's okay to give the learner up to 3 tries on each item. Vowels are really what we're looking for here. Is the vowel correct? And a tip, if a learner adds an extra vowel, then that creates another syllable because syllables are controlled or created by vowels unless it's 2 vowels together that we call a diphthong, like I or ow or oi. If there's no response for 5 items in a row in group 1, assuming that it's not just a motivational issue, just mark the rest of the items 0 and tally the score. Okay, let's look at group 2. Remember, up to 3 tries are allowed. We would expect vowels to be mostly correct by group 2, but the consonants may be wrong. Mark these accordingly. If the learner doesn't want to repeat a particular phrase, like phooey, for example, see if you can create a similar combination that might work. It should just meet the criteria of group 2, 2 syllables and any of the consonants in group 2 or in group 1. So instead of phooey, you could substitute gooey or cabby or FEMA or similar items. It's okay to use any vowels or diphthongs, which is 2 vowels together again, along with group 1 and group 2 consonants. But keep in mind, don't blend the consonants together. That's a later developmental level, like SL together, or FR or TR or something like that. And then just be sure to jot the substituted phrase or the word in place of the one that you didn't use on the form. Okay, group 3. Similar instructions here as in group 2. You can change items that seem difficult or unappealing to the learner as long as there are 3 syllables and the consonants are from group 1 and group 2. And then be sure to cross off the phrase that you didn't use and jot in the one that you did. In the upcoming manual, we'll have some alternative test items to make things a little bit easier and give you more choices of test items to give. Groups 4 and 5 have to do with the music of language and speech, not the vowels and consonants, but the music that rides above that, pitch, duration, and loudness. It doesn't matter in these groups if the articulation is off. You're just listening for pitch, loudness, and duration of sound making. Sometimes learners who have had too specific echoic speech training have a hard time sustaining their voices over more than 1 or 2 syllables. And that affects their mean length of utterance. It makes their speech sound choppy and robotic. So it's important to assess whether or not they can do that or whether they need some instruction in that area. So you're listening for pitch, which would be high pitch, low pitch. You're listening for loudness, soft and loud. And then in group 5, you're listening for the duration, the ability to produce many syllables on one breath, or even sustain 1 syllable like ah for up to 3 seconds. If the specific items seem too juvenile for your learner or too hard, then it's fine to substitute other items. Just look at groups 1, 2, and 3 for some possible items that you could switch out. And then one last comment about duration. If the learner can already repeat several syllables in a row, or they can sing a line from a song, then it's clear that they have adequate duration. You can just skip this item, give full credit, and then tally up the score on the VB map. Okay, I hope these tips and comments are helpful. Okay. I think that is everything that I could think of to give you some information about the ESA, how and when to administer it, and some tips to help out with possible planning of instruction. My email, in case anyone would like to comment or contact me, is on the title page of the presentation, and that should be uploaded as for all of you as well. Thanks so much.